maybe next time to catch the topics from the community. Welcome to the part 2, where we're gonna continue the remaining topics from the Lahiru's article. So in case you didn't know, we have discussed about the workflow design up to this point, and now we will continue to the readability. So welcome again, Lahiru. And yes. So let's continue and give us a couple of more details, like how will you improve the readability? We have covered some of the topics in the previous video, and I think we should emphasize more on this because, from my opinion, I think some of the topics somehow they repeat, or if you're gonna do the other way around, if you're gonna do the things from the previously, you somehow reach to have a more readable robot. But let's just give us more details. How do you improve the readability, or show us some
details? So based on what we already discussed in the previous part, having proper naming conventions, having proper way of designing the workflows, that improves the readability. But when it comes to building these solutions, sometimes for one particular process, you might build about 2 or 3 sub-processes, and that combination is what's going to automate your end-to-end process. So, and this particular, if you take one project that you develop, that is not just one workflow. It will have a lot of workflows, it will have different configuration files, it will have many different things.
Yeah.
So to have things in a much better way, along with what we discussed, we can also have another set of stuff, activities that we can do, like organizing your workflows as well. So you can have different folders within your solution that actually holds all your configuration files. And so let's take an application, a SAP application, for example. In SAP, you have to log in, you have to navigate to different menus, and you're going to do different interactions like entering data, you're retrieving data, exporting it to Excel, likewise, many different things that you do.
Yeah.
So each and every task you perform, those are separated into different workflows. So instead of just having those workflows lying around in your root folder, you can actually organize those workflows based on the system or based on the maybe different grouping that you can include to actually separate or have these workflows in a much better organized way. So it can be very helpful for someone who is trying to understand that, because then you, as we discussed earlier, you will have a nice name for the workflow, but also having that grouping will also help someone to understand you. Let's say it's extracting customer information. From where you're going to extract this and why you're extracting this, those things will be there in that group. So that's one thing. And the next thing is you have your workflows now properly named, but by the name, looking at the name, you know that this is what's going to happen. You are extracting customer data. So along with that, if we can explain a little bit how or what is actually happening in this work, some meaningful thing. I am not saying that you have to write paragraphs of text that explains what's going to happen. Just in couple of lines or couple of sentences, just explain that this is what's happening inside this workflow, and for this to happen, you have to have these things, and after this workflow ends, this will be your output. So by someone opening that workflow, you have the nice name, extracting customer information, and you also have a simple description that describes what's actually going on, along with what's expected for that to happen, and at the end, what you're getting out of it. So that will give you a very nice understanding about the entire workflow at a glance.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with you. Do you use often these comments?
yep.
Yeah.
Comments and annotations both, actually.
Annotations, yeah, they are very powerful. But how do you, I mean, if you just make a comparison, again, I'm gonna do the ranking stuff. So what we have previously discussed about namings, about splitting, about grouping, about, I don't know, sequences, flowcharts and things like that. And you would just rank, you have just two things to rank. Let's say you can create a workflow which respects, I don't know, the namings, is grouped. How you would rank this entire practice from 1 to 10, and how do you rank this annotation part? Because this is more related, I would say it's kind of metadata. How you would rank these two?
Yeah,
and why?
So having that proper names, again, I would go for 10. It's no doubt. And having this description, I would again highly recommend that.
Okay.
So if you actually go through that article in the screenshot,
Yeah.
you can see that it includes the description, a small section for variables.
Yeah.
That can be there, or it might not be there, that's fine. And also the next important thing is the precondition and the post-condition.
Yeah.
So I would recommend to have it, because this metadata is what's going to tell you what is actually happening in this particular section of the program. And it's easy to, for anyone, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to.
But yeah. Do you think, I mean, this is kind of metadata, okay? So it's somehow a data related to what's there. And you have a bit of overhead. Okay, apart from just adding the documentation, you need to maintain, okay? So in this example, we have given, okay, variables, username, string, password, secure string. This one you need to keep in sync, okay? So there is a bit of overhead, and I'm trying to make the ranking not just because it's recommended to not recommended, but the fact it's a ranking, for me it's a balance with the effort that you are putting to maintain. And because in the end, okay, you have the code which makes the thing maintainable. You have this metadata that it makes, I don't know, easy for a newcomer maybe, or the fact that the splitting, it's easy for newcomer also. And then you have the testing for the client, you know. So I see this RPA project lifecycle in 3 parts, let's say, just the development, without analyzing, without just the development part, right? So every step has an effort, and you need to balance this effort, because, okay, it consumes maybe, I don't know, 1 hour, or I don't know, 10 minutes from your life to write a description. Maybe you're not good at writing, okay? Someone like you maybe should do that, or who should do that? Who should be the responsible for maintaining? And how often how much you would enforce this type of a rule of commenting, because this is just a comment at the annotation, right? How you would tackle these approaches?
So what we usually do is, so when it comes to this development, we are fully focused on developing the logic and getting things moving and finalizing that. So this descriptions and those stuff can wait until we actually finalize the workflow, because things can change over time. So, and putting a lot of effort in writing something, it's not really important when it comes to, when you actually compare that with building the actual workflow. So first, I would build the workflow, finalize everything, and at the very end, when you will also go through certain cycles of code quality. especially with your solution architects or the team leads that who are handling this project. So at that point, once you do the review, maybe the first review, along with that, you can have a small description there that this is what's going to happen here.
Who will write?
Could be the developer itself.
Okay.
Because he's the one who knows what's actually happening, not anybody else.
Okay. So the developer writes the annotation. Okay. I need to tell you that this one needs to have some good English skills. This description. Congratulations to this developer. It's not like I don't know, most of the comments which I have seen. Appreciate that. Variables. The description, let's say I understand, but why do you put the variables and arguments here?
Well, again, there are like different ways of doing this because I have seen all of these methods. So some guy will just write the description and they won't mention anything about variables, arguments because it's already there in those panels. So you can ignore that. But the other thing is, if they have a good amount of time to spend on all that, they might write. But forget about the variables and the arguments part. I would focus on the description that what's actually happening there, and the next important things are the precondition and the postcondition.
Okay, so I don't want to go to the precondition and postcondition. I'm just gonna tackle right now. So the description, you would say that it's important to have it, right? Okay. So the arguments, the variables and the arguments, I didn't get what your opinion should be written because you said that they're available in the bottom, right? In the bottom part.
Yeah, in the panels. Yeah.
So why do you think this one should be here? Why do you find the arguments and the variables?
Well, that again depends. So someone might prefer just reading through because once you open the workflow, this is the first part that you see.
Yeah.
So someone might just glance through that and try to understand, okay, these are the stuff that are here. But maybe in a big workflow, you can't do that because you have a lot of variables, you have a lot of arguments. So in such cases, you can always refer to the variable panel and the argument panel. It's already there, so you don't need to do the same thing here.
Yes, but if you're gonna have a lot of variables, you're gonna have a lot of variables here in the comments also. So I don't know if it gets rid of that problem. Moreover, for me, I find it difficult. I just want you to hear. I'm gonna be honest. I will not sustain this approach, but I just want you to find your opinion. For me, it's hard to. Basically, I'm having the same region of text, two things: the variables and arguments, and like you said, you have maybe more variables. In this case, you have just two. Maybe I have 3 or 4. And besides that, I'm gonna have the arguments. I mean, in the UiPath Studio, these are separated. Okay, the variables are separate to arguments, so like you can easily switch to that. So I'm more interested to find your approach. Maybe I can see that this one is a window, sub window. That's cool. That's cool. Okay. Do you use it
like the window variables?
Yeah. Do you use often? Okay. So I don't want to discuss about window. I'm gonna discuss right in a moment. So you say you're for this type of usages for this documentation. How do you find maintainable? How often?
Yeah. So that's why I said earlier. So this thing has to. If you are doing that, you have to do it at the very end. So then things are finalized. Yeah.
Okay. I get it. So it's more like post documentation after.
Yes.
Okay.
So it could be also a part of this solution design document, the SDD.
Okay.
So what we usually do is we have a quite comprehensive SDD. And that basically includes the workflows that we are using, the name of the workflow, the description and arguments, variables, everything. And sometimes clients do expect that as well.
Okay, so you're the one who is in charge of creating this CDD document, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how strict is to respect the CDD? Because you just respond to a question. I'm gonna give a spoiler after.
Yeah. So it's like this. So on the client side, they also have a IT team that really needs to look into what we are doing, because at the end, after we develop and give it to them, at some point they are going to take over these things and they are going to have it on their own. So they need to know what's actually happening.
Okay.
So this is based on my couple of past experiences that I had with different clients. So they, in such cases, they really insist on having this document, a very detailed document.
Okay.
So
just before to start the process, right? So this is it's the post analysis. The project has been, it's suitable for automation, and before to start the development, you are in charge to discuss with the clients and create this document, right?
Yeah. So some guys will actually ask for this SDD at the very beginning.
Okay.
But some guys, they're not in that kind of a hurry to have the SDD. They can have it at the end once they finalize everything.
Did you find a pattern? Can you share some your knowledge regarding what are the reasons these guys are asking, and what are your problem? I mean, not problems. What things are you gonna face? Because you have two situations, okay? The one who how these two things it affects the development decision for your team. Let's take it that way.
Yeah. So
and the entire development process.
Yeah. So when you're actually doing that, so basically when it comes to this solution design, it's mostly the solution architect who does that, because he has everything in his mind. So doing this at the beginning will be a little bit difficult, because he has to have everything in his mind, because you don't actually have a project built, but they are asking for all this information. So I actually came across this scenario once, where we actually did some assessments for one of the clients, and they actually wanted the PDD and also the SDD before getting into development.
Okay.
So PDD is one thing, that's okay. So SDD, to do that they expected to have the workflow names, arguments, variables, exceptions happening inside that workflow, and how you resolve it, every single thing. So it's basically like you have the solution virtually inside your head and you have to write it. So yeah, so it's, in that case, it's a little bit difficult, because you don't have anything like that, but you are using your imagination.
How hard? I mean, how challenging is to create such a document from nothing? Basically, I mean, okay, from your brain, but basically you have nothing.
Yeah, so it is, again, it depends on a couple of other things on how you actually prepare for it. So what I usually do is when I'm designing the solution, so forget about this SDD. After the requirement gathering session, after we analyze everything, the first thing I do is I draw a very detailed diagram. And I always look for ways to go into workflow level, or at least having the names of those works. So we usually use this flowchart, right? We usually use Visio or something similar. And in those boxes, I try to at least use the workflow name, so that I know by looking at this box, I know that, let's say it's SAP login, for example. And when I see that, I know, okay, to do this, you have to have the username, password, and you have to get something out of it.
Would you, from what I know, I don't know if such thing exists, but would it help some tool from UiPath that it will be targeted for architects and somehow would allow you to draw this type of diagrams and somehow make the link between the development and the stories? I don't know, integrate with the source control. Would you to have this type of tool from UiPath? Or
it
not?
is always good to have it, but I don't know how complex that is. So we have the task capture up to now.
Okay.
So, and we can record the steps and we can convert that to a workflow. But when it comes to like having multiple workflows and mapping out the entire thing, it just gives you one single workflow from task capture. So that might not be enough to do that. So maybe they can improve that in a way so that we can actually design the flow there itself and then directly export it to a nice solution.
So another thing from the guys from UiPath. So if someone from UiPath is seeing this second video, that's the second feature we would like to have it. The integration with the task capture and the fact to create something, the tool, so to make them bridge, this kind of bridge.
Yeah, actually that will save a lot of time because we spend quite a lot of time in designing these solutions, and especially when it comes to that scenario where you have to give this SDD before we start the development. So that is quite difficult because the other team members might be able to help up to some extent, but you are the one who have this entire thing inside your head, and you are the one who know that this is how it links to each and every component.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay.
It's good to have that kind of thing with all these arguments that we can actually try to even mention these arguments and stuff like that.
Okay. So basically it's an incremental step which you're saying to have, but you need to use a lot of experience to create this, to imagine a lot of things, and then how often is to respect this document? How strict it is? Are you, because this kind of flow, for me, it sounds like waterfall model, right? It's not agile, you know? So how strict it is, how make you balance? Because you can see a lot of teams that they are using agile, Scrum. Okay, Scrum is just, I don't know, the way how do you report. I'm more referring here to the agile, right? So how do you see this mixture? Are you using waterfall? Are you using agile? What's the way? How do you work with the team?
For me, it's something like a mixture of waterfall and agile.
Okay.
Because some things are there that you cannot do like that, do like in agile, but because you have to have it in a sequential order. You have to first complete that and then move to the next. So it depends on your client, because I have come across clients that they enforce in using agile. They want to have agile here. But if they are not that strict in that, we can plan out in a much better way that we are also comfortable and they are also comfortable. So when it comes to this document, some people don't even care about it. They just want the solution and that's it. But,
which is okay.
Yeah, that's okay. But some people, they really do care about it. So in that case, it especially comes from the IT teams, because they want to see what's happening there. So in that case, we have to build it. So what I usually do is, if they don't want to have it at the beginning, we give it at the end.
Okay.
In case they want it. So during the course of this development, so by the time we start the development, we have the high level idea. We have the process map and the technical diagrams, everything. And based on that, we can fill a part of this SDD up to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we complete the development, then we can take in parts from those completed tasks and then update the document along with that. So that's how we usually do it.
Okay.
So it takes some time, and it's like additional effort for a solution architect, but yeah, if they want it, we have to do it.
How strict, by the way, I guess you're responsible for estimations, for client discussion. How strict are you with the documentation? And what are the prerequisites that you are asking? I know the best practices for UiPath, but for instance, from my experience when working with clients, I'm gonna be honest, I never respect them. Okay, they are very good. Okay, the documents, the documents. Okay, I'm not talking about the flowcharts. Those are okay. Okay, you need to have. More related to the PDD. You definitely need to know how many hours you have before, how many hours you save, and these are somehow part of the estimation part. Okay, so you need to deliver some kind of document, but the way how they recommend to be so strict, I don't find it. I find it useful, but I think in very large projects and and even in large projects, I didn't use it so often. We were instead using a wiki for a client. Actually, for many clients, we have used wiki, where we were preferred to use this approach. It was more friendly, let's say, or more usable. Instead, I would use. I'm gonna share first my experience. The documents. One time happens to have a document about. I think there was 56 pages with screenshots from application, with drawings, with snipping tool, with red highlighting things and explaining. And for me, it's very difficult to read these kind of documents. I find it a bit outdated. Indeed, there are a way to do it, but I find it more waterfall approach. And to be honest, I have worked in projects for waterfall, which are fine. But for 10 years ago, they were fine. But nowadays, it's not about the time. It's about the mindset who someone came to you, okay? So somehow needs to make a balance between the documentation and what you request to understand the concept, So what I usually do, I'm doing that 100% of the clients. There's no discussion. I'm not gonna start any project without having a screen sharing. So a screen sharing with him's talking, him's microphone, and description, that makes me to have a clear overview what he expects, because creating documents, it takes time and effort, and not necessarily that, but it's hard to read. No one, with so low attention span, we humans nowadays, we have YouTube. People that are watching now on YouTube, right? They're not, they're reading blogs. Blogs are perfectly fine, but there's not about bandwidth. Everything is mobile. So how do you what are the rules that you enforce, and what are the rules that you discuss, let's say, of the size of the client? Because, okay, if one client said, okay, I'm gonna want the specification document, the development specification document before to start, okay, he's the client, you're just gonna make it, okay? But how do you enforce this rule? How do you make this balance? What rules are you applying? Let's take that way, or how do you make this balance?
Yeah, good question. So again, we have come across all these different kind of people. So some guys, they really need this, but some guys. So recently, what we did for one client, we discussed about a couple of processes, which they wanted to have an estimate first, okay. And then, which they discussed earlier, and they wanted to do a POC, okay, for one particular process. And once we did that actually within 1 week, and they were satisfied with that. And then they wanted to go ahead and discuss this process in detail for the actual development. And this discussion took place just within 1 week, and we were talking about 5 to 6 processes. And at the end, they wanted to have the estimates and everything, including the licensing cost and the development cost and many other stuff like the timelines and stuff like that. So if you are to go ahead and spend a lot of time on this documentation, it takes time. So you can't just meet their requirement by spending a lot of time on documenting each and everything. So in that case, what we usually do is we keep aside the PDD for a while, and we just go for another high-level document, which we call as the process proposal or the project proposal.
Okay.
So that basically includes a very high description about the as-is process and a very high-level description about this is how it's going to be automated and this is how it will look like. So no screenshots, nothing in that document. So just the process maps, that's it. And along with that, we will have like a couple of other things like the timelines, the estimates, the licenses, and everything.
Okay.
And also the machine config.
Okay, so it's more related to the automation project. Let's say you're gonna. Okay, I guess it's somehow part of the PDD, right? Because it's part of the PDD. You're gonna describe how many licenses you need. You may describe the process as is, as before, what you should expect, how many hours they were saved, how many hours they were before as is, how many hours they were saved, and I guess the technical details about the cost, implementation cost, what could vary, what could be the, what could be the margin, what could be, depending on the risk, assuming, maybe you don't want to go with the client with 100% of the cases. You're going to probably put a margin there, 10%, or really depending on the type that you risk you assume, right?
Yeah.
So something like that, okay. But this is the document which you create. I was referring more to the document which you request from the client to make the things clear for you. What's your approach on that? Because I said that I never start a project without a video. That's no discussion. But what's your approach?
I agree with that. So I also do not actually, I don't even want to be in a meeting where they don't share the screen and where they are just discussing stuff, because we can't understand. We don't know what they're doing. Yeah. So even when we actually start the process, the first thing that I usually do is I list down the stuff that they had to be prepared with before we getting into this discussion.
Okay.
So that might include at least some kind of documentation they have. So we don't know, they might not have any kind of documentation. That's totally fine. So at least they should be able to share a video or screen share and show it to us at the time we are discussing this. So that is something that I also look at, because then we can actually visualize what they're trying to do and what applications they are using, whether it's remote desktop or whatever. So that actually gives us a much clearer picture, and that ease out our lives as well to actually propose something.
Okay.
So along with that, what we do is, so we have that discussion with all that, and then we go for another round of confirmation after our internal discussions, and then we finalize things, and then we put it into a document. That could be a PDD or a proposal or anything.
Okay, and I guess you're gonna split. I guess you're gonna split the task somehow at that level. I don't know how many developers you need. You need an architect for about 2 hours or 3 days. How many devs? And you don't make the timeline of the project then, but you make the estimation, because maybe the client, it will pass one month between you have the discussion and you have other things in your pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So you make like an effort estimation, right? Yeah, we are having the same approach on here, so I just want to find your opinion. Okay, so I think we discussed somehow related to, we moved our discussion from workflow to more like a technical prerequisite to the process, right? Okay, so for me it's clear. How do you tackle, how do you start a project? Okay, so I see something about the arguments. Out sub window, this is a variable of type window. And I like this approach, but how often do you use it and why?
Yeah, so I always prefer to use this window concept, not because of anything else, because mainly because I need to reduce the number of errors.
Okay.
So sometimes, especially when you're working with web pages or different websites, you always deal with selectors. So there can be slight things. Even a title of this window can ruin the next part of your workflow. Let's say your attached browser activity, if you include a selector, it will just work perfectly fine. But at some point, if you are in a different page than what you have mentioned there, it just run into an error. So using a window, it knows that it needs to refer to this particular window, whatever the title it is or whatever the window it is. So it makes your lives easy. That's why I always use that.
I prefer to use this approach also until I found bugs in the UiPath. So I thought maybe it's me, but I think I found the bug. So I'm gonna tell you the bug. I wanted to, this bug, I think I found it 1 month or 2 months ago. I wanted to see if, theoretically this is possible. You have 3 windows, 3 Internet Explorer windows, and you want to launch in parallel, but in the same robot. And because this window is basically a scope, right? As long as you have this scope isolated, theoretically they should work. Well, at the moment, or at least 1 month ago with the version, 2019, 2020.10, I think it was, it didn't work. I tried to launch 2 Internet Explorer or 3, I don't remember. And I had an automation which was working perfectly with 1 window. But when we switched to 2, I don't know, this is a limitation, I guess, from the UiPath, not the UiPath Studio. I know it's another team. It's called UI automation or a feature. It doesn't work. So that should be the 3rd bug or the 2nd feature that we want to have it fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they have a lot of backlog, the guys. They probably have client bugs and okay, these guys, they're just complaining and they are not doing anything. And we don't just want the rest of the bugs. We are happy without.
Yeah.
How about the login status? You say this one to be a Boolean. Why do you use a Boolean and why not use a Boolean? Why do you use a Boolean instead?
So why I did that in this particular scenario is because I wanted to control the remaining part of the workflow. Because this login is happening in one particular workflow. And for the rest of the things to work, we need to have a successful login. So That's why I took it out as an output argument so that I can use it in the next part to actually decide whether we need to continue or not. So the specific reason was, there were a couple of reasons. Either the account is locked or that same account is being used by someone else, or it's actually you are logged in a different machine. So the robot can't actually log in. So for SAP, the scenario is it just prompts you a different window saying, this is already active, what do you do? Sort of.
Okay.
So to handle such kind of special scenarios, we might need it.
Okay, but I'm gonna tell you a pitfall if you use this. So if you're gonna use Boolean, you're gonna lose the reason. Okay, you know just that the login was true or false, but you don't know why didn't login was caused. So I just want you, this is somehow, I think, if that possible feature, if that activity would be possible to return, if that activity would exist in UiPath, probably would not need this login status. But for instance, for me, when I have a login status and I see Boolean, okay, I know that the login has successful or not, but why didn't succeed? I mean, okay, I'm gonna have outside, I'm gonna call this SAP login, and then I'm gonna have an if login was success, I'm gonna continue. Otherwise, I'm gonna display to the user, okay, unable to success, but why? And I'm gonna use the why. Yes. So personally, for instance, I prefer to use exceptions. And I'm gonna make an assumption, okay, I'm gonna have this component which is called login, and I'm not gonna return a Boolean, because by the way, you're gonna increase the cyclomatic complexity of the robot with the ifs. Yeah. So as long as you make an assumption, I make an assumption I'm the worst programmer. Okay, I'm the worst programmer, so all my code can break, and because I leave it on purpose to break. Okay, I cannot log in to this SAP. I'm gonna throw an exception. I cannot log in because. Okay, I cannot log in because it's already logged in. You know. Yeah. And by the way, the fact that and this is another tricky question. Let's say from your nominal case. I think this is more sensible. This is more like a decision to go one way or another way, but I'm going to tell you what I prefer to use this approach in specific to this login. So let's say to your login in the SAP doesn't consider that the user is logged in, right? So what's happened? You're going to call the component. You can see that the user is logged in, and you have two options. You can either throw an exception, or you can simply ignore and go back from this one, you know. And usually what I do, and that's why I'm gonna make a link with the precondition stuff. I usually have some workflows which they're called ensure something, ensure the user is logged in, and before to call, for instance, if my SAP login, it requires from a nominal case to have the user log in, to have the user logged in, then I'm gonna make an assignment. Okay, I'm gonna ensure that the user is logged in. Otherwise, that component will throw an exception, so my workflow will stop. You know. And if I would have the component to handle both of the cases, if the user is logged in, or if it's not to log in, just two cases. The other ones, if the user is locked, if the user is, I don't know what happened, I could not perform the login. If that one is part from my nominal case, I prefer to throw in exceptions. And otherwise, okay, I'm gonna have a small if there. No one will be angry with the small if. If I'm already logged in, I'm gonna have a nested something. And we agree that it's acceptable, one if, maximum two, right? As long as I'm not gonna scroll two screens, we should be fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what again, this is what I would prefer to do, and that's the reason I do it. Okay, so related to precondition to SAP logon, which you said, it's actually very good. What I like to do is to create a workflow which is very simple. For instance, in this case, if I require the SAP to be logged in, I would create an argument. I would create a workflow which will receive this window, and we'll have a look to the SAP logon. That one will have a tiny amount of timeout. So usually what I do, I have this project, and I don't know, I'm just gonna add a new sequence, and I'm gonna name ensure, okay, maybe with the typo, ensure log in, because that's past tense, right? So ensure logged in. And what I do here, I'm gonna make an attach window. I'm gonna probably use a find element with a very small timeout. So I probably, okay, my computer is very slow, not find children, I want to find element. So I want to find element with a very tiny timeout. I'm gonna pass to the arguments the argument, and then the other workflows are, I'm just gonna call this. So let's say into the communication, I'm gonna drag and drop ensure login. So this way I'm making sure that my precondition is met, you know? And if I have multiple preconditions, I prefer to call multiple requirements. And in this way, it's not only written, but it's happening in the code. Because from my side, and the way, this is something which I have faced, there is this desynchronization, you know? I'm just gonna drag and drop here, and I'm gonna, this one, ensure logged in will be called. Indeed, you're gonna say that, okay, this workflow will be slower. You're probably right. That timeout, that's why I'm gonna decrease that timeout define window. I'm trying to make this as fast as possible. To be honest, I didn't felt to make it faster. It happens many times the robots to behave way faster than the system they were automating. So I had many cases where I had to put a delay. And I know that UiPath doesn't recommend delay. Yes, but I use delay. Yes, UiPath, I'm guilty.
I use that too.
Okay, it's our okay. Yes, that's usually happen when you use in production. Okay, so this is the way how I use the enforcement. I can add the comment. I use comments, but not so often. Like you said, by the way, this is a project from production. This is a project not from production, but it's from a course which I have created, and I'm talking about some enterprise patterns, and one of them is this naming. How do you group, and how do you make this decision to keep these things smaller? For instance, something which I have talked in a previous video about which I have on my YouTube channel, it's about exception handling. And there is a behavior which UiPath, I mentioned previously. You have a try, and you don't have anything in the catch, but you want to finally block to be executed. And if you have the catch empty, the finally will not be executed. And there is already a discussion in the forum, I told you. So the way how I overpass to that, because usually I'm interested to have in the same component, I'm gonna open, but I want to close also, you know? And if there is any exception, I want to throw it after. So usually this is the pattern which I like to use. This is called more like ownership. So this component is ownership to download monthly reports, for instance. It's opening a browser every time, but if an exception occurs, I know that it will close the close tab, you know? So in this way, I don't care if I'm gonna use reframework, because if you're gonna use reframework with the download monthly reports in the close all applications, how many close applications you're gonna have? Okay, you're gonna say, okay, you will kill all the applications. That's not the graceful thing to do it, you know? That's the hard way. So usually what I like to create when I create components, I like to have this notion of ownership. And this pattern, for instance, what I do here, I'm not doing anything magic. So just, I'm gonna have a try. Here in this case, I'm gonna invoke another workflow. I have nested workflows. I'm gonna catch the exception. And I have the variable of exception here, you see? Which is a type of exception. And then in the finally block, I'm gonna close the tab which I have open here. And then I'm gonna make sure, okay, did I have an exception? But I have already closed my tab. Then I'm gonna throw the exception which I have here, you see?
Right.
So this is a pattern which I like to use. It's not necessarily needed when you're using the modern design activities. Those have implemented this ownership capability. Yes, and by the way, you can have this approach in every component. In download monthly report, I'm gonna do the same approach. So download monthly report, I have the same approach with the throw. I think I have the same approach. In this case, I have an attach. Okay, never mind. But you can have this approach in nested, you know?
Can I ask one question on that
Yes.
concept?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that idea.
Yeah.
So at the end of each component, using the try catch, and in case in the final block, closing the tab.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you actually close, you are not logging out.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
Next time when the robot tries to do the login, you are already logged in. So
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
So I'm glad that you have asked that. That's the way I don't like to call login. Because login is an operation, I like to call open new session. So open new session, what I usually do, I open a browser. And I have this, as you can see, I'm opening a new session, and I'm making sure that if I have a session, I'm gonna do the logout. You can see the trick?
All right. Okay.
It's an okay. Again, this is a part of the nominal case. I don't say it's good or bad, but for given the naming, open new session, it's opening a new session for me. There's no discussion, okay? If I have a session which is open, this one is ignore. Otherwise, it will do the logout. And whatever component calls this open new, whatever code calls this open new session, it will know that it will have a new session, you know? So that's the trick which I use. It really depending on the naming. For me, login is not something which it's not such descriptive, let's say, you know. So that's why I prefer to be more verbose to naming. I find it very difficult to find proper names. But yeah, depending on the behavior I expect to have here. And I think I'm using the same approach. Yes, you can see element exists. I have this timeout for 1 second. I think I can use it lower. I'm making sure that wait for ready is complete. This one I'm interested. And I'm setting a timeout for 1 second. Anyway, how often you're gonna open a new session? I'm interested more to create a reliable code rather than be a bit slower. I'm fine with the fact to have the code slower rather than having bugs and do the maintenance again, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
So this is just the project which I had created, and I want to give to the viewers some practical advices from my work experience. So you can say, I don't know, if you see something to improve, I would be glad to have it. So if I want to going back a bit to the workflow files, the way how I organize, and we can move to the next topic. I like to use nouns for folders and verbs for actions, like you said here. And to be honest, I respect these all the time, almost 100%. So, okay, work items is something related to the work item, and as you can see, I'm getting the work item, and if I didn't get, I'm gonna prefer to throw the exception. So that's the approach which I prefer to use.
Right.
I know. But what do you think about?
Yeah, that's a really good approach. So I like that concept.
Okay.
Yeah, and in case you are not using the Arctic framework and all this complex stuff. Yeah.
No, this is actually a library process. As you can see, it's not a process; it's a library. Yeah. And I'm not concerned about those kind of things. And it's not about a framework or something. I just want to make a group for an application. I'm describing my thinking process in I'm gonna leave a link here for the viewers. I have a course where I'm basically build these maintainable robots. I'm giving some enterprise from my experience, which for me it worked, and I want to be helpful for others as well. And regarding the login, I'm just using the attach window. In this case, I'm not using window. So this is something which I like, what you said. I'm using the plain selector, this HTML. Indeed, it will only work with one Internet Explorer. However, I was disappointed, like I said. If I would know that UiPath would work with 2 Internet Explorer browsers, I would definitely use a window. However, it doesn't work. So at least at the moment of this recording, or at least 2 months ago, it was this bug present. So this is something which I do. Yes, this grouping I like a lot. So this grouping I like, the fact that you like to group everything which is interactive with the SAP, and like you mentioned, I highly recommend to do that. Yes, we have covered something about exception handling also. This one it's a sensible topic. It's sensible because it's not so. I mean, it's really depending on the application that you're building. Here in this workflow, you are throwing a new business rule exception, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And business rule exception, you can throw it from multiple reasons. For instance, a user, I don't know, doesn't have something fill in, is missing a point or a validation during an if, right? But another reason can come from another exception which can happen. How do you catch that exception? With a try. Okay. So usually you probably have this try catch, and in the catch you're gonna catch the exception, and here basically you're gonna have this throw, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna make a throw inside the catch, and you say, okay, new business rule exception, something like that. Oh, you cannot see my screen. You cannot see my screen. I'm just gonna share it right now. So something like that. You have this try catch, right? In the catch, you're gonna have this throw, and this throw you're gonna have this business rule exception, and you're just giving a name or something like that. When you're taking this decision to convert an exception, an application exception, to a business rule exception, let's say, right? Or do you use this pattern, or do you like it, or not?
Yeah, so we do that usually. So
yeah,
how we do the segregation is usually, so if the exception is related to application, let's say you cannot find something on screen, or you cannot actually log in on stuff like that. Because if it is something very specific to the application that you're dealing with, then I would go for the application exception. But I prefer the use of business rule exception when you're actually dealing with the data, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
So data is what you're going to process through whatever you're building.
Okay.
And if at some point, if that data doesn't meet your requirement, that means you cannot, at least for that transaction, you cannot proceed further. So in such cases, I would use the business rule exception, saying because of this reason, you cannot proceed with this.
Okay.
And that is something that you cannot retry as well, because it's not there, and no matter how many times you retry, it's going to be the same. But the application, you can retry and try to overcome that.
Okay. Okay, so you prefer, let's say, business rule exception to use for user-related errors, or more related to behavior application, right? Okay. So for application errors, you're gonna leave to throw the selector not found exception, or the errors that UiPath throws usually?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so related to application exceptions, applications are more related to, indeed, like Lahiru said here, to the application behavior. You can throw the same reason like you have using the business rule exception, you can throw an application exception also. Be careful that reframework, when you're using reframework, doesn't handle application exceptions separately, so it will handle just like a normal exception. Use a log message. Yes, this is correct. I use log messages most of the time. Lahiru, can you share some experience when you don't use log messages and when you use it? I mean, when you use it, okay.
Yeah, so in my case, I usually do this. So at some point, you need to also keep track of. So backtracking a little bit, when this process is running in the production, you're not using the studio, so you can see what's happening. So if something happens, if you encounter any error, you have to go through the logs to see what actually happened. So what I usually do is so we have different workflows, and what I do is at the beginning of the workflow, I say that starting this particular workflow just as an info, and at the end you're saying you just entered this. So if when I'm going through the logs, then I know that this particular part was fine. And I do the same thing in different, if you have like sub-components in a bigger workflow. But I don't overload the workflow with a lot of logs, because that also takes some processing time. So I don't want to put a whole lot of stuff there. It's only the most important things.
How do you define what is important or not?
So two things. One is you have to make sure that even if you don't see any error, you have to make sure that it got executed properly. So that start and end thing is quite enough for me.
Okay.
And apart from that, in special cases like where you have this try catch and where you have those exception, in scenarios where you can run into exceptions, there I particularly use this log message to try to log what exception occurred and where and why. So those things are what I'm looking for.
Okay. By the way, I find this, maybe I'm gonna create a component on the marketplace, but giving your thoughts, I'm thinking to a component, to an activity actually, where inside you can put some code. For instance, you can invoke some code, and when the activity starts to create a log, whatever log message, I don't know, info and something, and when it ends, to have a log also, because sometimes there are cases where the log at the end in the component is not written, and to be honest, I don't like so much to have logging at the beginning, at the end, to all the components, only to the components that make sense. And what makes sense, well, it really depends on the granularity which I want to go further. So if I want to download the file, okay, definitely I want to see that it started to download it. But if I see that the next file started to see and I don't see any error between, I don't see the need to have an error at the end, So for cases where you need this guarding 100%, like the try finally, the trick which I show you here, to have an activity, like everything which you drag and drop there, have the log at the beginning 100% and to have at the end 100%, when you need more tracing or when you need this kind of thing. Otherwise, I would prefer just to use the log message at the beginning. It's much easier to, I know.
Yeah, that's a different way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so application exceptions, throw catch. I think this is pretty much it. Orchestrator queues, indeed, you have atomic transactions, and these are important things, and supported by the orchestrator. The general exception and the rest of the things we're gonna continue in the next part. Great, Lahiru, thanks again for being here. The rest of the topics we're gonna discuss in the next video, and yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, and thank you, Daniel, for this amazing initiative again. So just like we did for the part 1, part 2, again with part 3 or maybe part 4. So there's a lot of knowledge for everyone.
Yeah.
And we are from different backgrounds, so that experience and what we are sharing, it will be very helpful for each and every guy, especially for beginners as well. So yeah, let's keep doing it and let's keep in touch.
To be honest, I like this type of discussions because it's valuable for both of us, and it's not defining that is something correct or not. I'm going to emphasize again, someone needs to make some rules in order not to respect, but to align the team. And I think this is most important. The rules, they can be changed. And something which I have forgot to mention, by the way, and I'm just going to end with this idea. When you're talking about the specification document and about the PDD, when I resolve the problems for getting the RPA developer advanced, they are giving you the PDD. I didn't respect that PDD, the specification document. I mean, I respect it, but not 100%, you know? And not because something is bad or good. It's something which I felt it needs to be improved. And I argue why I did that. I'm explaining this in, when I resolve the problem. Because as long as you have some arguments and you can sustain your idea and the others can agree with you, because, you know, at the end, it's just a common knowledge. This one, I think, is perfectly fine. So,
yeah, just to add one point on that before we wrap up. So I agree with your point again.
Yeah.
That PDD is, so I'm not saying that it's bad. It's good because it actually provides you initial template and a high level understanding that this is how it should be structured, but we can still improve it. And in our real world cases that we do include a lot of other things in that PDD.
Let's say every document can be improved, you know, and if you just feel that way, I mean, if that owner is responsible, if you're responsible, what's happening, and you have your reason to stick to that solution, you probably have your reasons, you know. So the whole point is that everything can be improved, including the written documents. That's a continuous learning, and that's by the way, that's agile to deliver everything to every sprint.
Yeah.
Thanks again, and I'm looking forward the next meetup, and to maybe next time to catch the topics from the community.
Yeah, and looking forward for that as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day. Just cut it from here. Do you hear a lot of background noise? Because there's a dog.
There is a dog. There is a dog. If you want, we can.
Yeah.
I have connected with the Google account. Let me show you until the dog stops. Hey Google, set the window to 50.
Sure. Opening the window cover to 50%.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it. It's moving.
Yeah. So this is something which I did. I'm passionate about home automation. Stop. So do you want to continue? Are you ready? Or do you think the dog is ready?
Okay.